Hey guys, Mr. Riss here to help you out with the day 2 of the 5.2 note. So we've added and subtract, or no, I shouldn't say that. We've multiplied and divided radicals, but now we're going to do the tough part, which is actually adding and subtracting. So one thing to note here is that radicals can be added and subtracted when they are like terms. They are like terms when both the index and the radical are identical. So like radical 3b and 4 radical 3b are like terms because they're both radical 3b. Radical 3b and the cube root of 3b are not like terms because even though they are the same thing on the inside, both of them are different indexes. And same thing like radical 2b and radical 3b are unlike terms because even though their indexes are the same and they both are b's, they have to be the same expression inside. Okay, so let's go through this. Can we add or subtract these radicals? So if I got radical 32 minus 2 radical 32, well, we're going to treat these like x's and y's at the beginning here. We can combine those together. They are the same radicals, and so we can work with those. And we can get an expression that is, well, okay, 1 minus 2 would be negative 1 radical 32. The one thing that we should always do, though, is always break down the radicals. And so let's break down radical 32. That's what, 16 and 2, 4 and 4. We could break it down more, but we got a pair of 4s. That's going to go outside with the negative 1. So the final answer would be negative 4 radical 2. Okay, let's clear this off. Well, let's kind of combine that. Now that's pretty easy. Let's take this a step further. What about multiplying radicals? So if we got 4 radical 3 plus 5 radical 2 times 3 radical 2 minus 6, let's see how we can combine those together. Well, we're going to FOIL these. So if I'm going to do 4 radical 3 times 3 radical 2, you can multiply the outside numbers together. See, 4 times 3 is 12. Radical 3 times 2 is 6. I then move on. All right, 4 radical 3 times negative 6. We just multiply the 4 times the negative 6. And that'd be a negative 24 radical 3. And then next, let's go through and multiply the 5 radical 2 to both of those. So 5 radical 2 times 3 radical 2. 5 times 3 is 15. Radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4. And then lastly, 5 radical 2 times negative 6 would be a negative 30 radical 2. All right, we would see if any of these can combine, which none of them do. We got a 6, a 3, a 4, and a 2. So the last thing we want to do is see if we can break any of these down. 12 radical 6 does not break down. That's just 12 radical 6. I mean, 6 is 2 times 3, but nothing breaks out. Minus 24 radical 3. Can't combine those. It's just radical 3. All right, what about square root of 4? The square root of 4 is 2. So we can actually break the 2 out, times it by the 15, and we would get 30, and there'd be no radical. And then 30 radical 2 is just by itself, cannot combine with the other ones. So this whole big long expression is the answer. Okay, so next, what about if we are dividing by an expression here? So what we got going on is 2 divided by 5, radical 5 minus 1. Now remember, we can't have a radical on the denominator, and unfortunately, we can't just like multiply by radical 5 over radical 5. So what we need to do here is to use the conjugate to help us out. Now the conjugate is a similar expression to the denominator, so we got a radical 5 and we got 1, but it's going to be the opposite symbol in between. We're going to put a plus in between, and we got to do that on the top and on the bottom. So let's take care of the top. The top is a little bit easier. 2 times radical 5 is 2 radical 5, plus 2 times 1 is 2. So that's the top, and those don't combine together. This has a radical 5. That doesn't have any radicals. Doesn't go together. Bottom gets a little bit more complicated. All right, radical 5 times radical 5 is radical 25. Radical 5 times 1 is radical 5. Then the negative 1 times radical 5 would be a negative radical 5. And then a negative 1 times the positive 1 is a negative 1. Now that bottom does simplify. We have clear out. Oh no, and I can't go backwards. All right, well, let's see. We would have had a 2 radical 5 plus 2. And then we had a radical 25, which the square root of 25 is 5. And then the 2 radicals would have canceled each other out. So we would have got 5 minus 1. So we can actually simplify that here. It's kind of good that I did that. Going backwards now this way, we'd get a 2 radical 5 plus 2 over 5 minus 1 is 4. The very last thing, and so this one's a pretty complicated problem, is can we reduce all these outside numbers together? Can we divide 2, 2, and 4 by the same thing? We sure can. We can divide them all by 2. So if we do that, we'd have 1 radical 5 plus 1 over 2. Ooh, that's the final answer. All right, let's use that concept on the next part here. What about 3 plus x divided by radical 2 plus x? So we need to multiply to get the radical off the bottom by radical 2 minus x on the top and on the bottom. All right, the top. 3 times radical 2 is 3 radical 2. 3 times x is minus 3x. X times radical 2 is x radical 2. X times negative x is a negative x squared. Now the top, none of those combine. This is a radical 2. Even though that's a radical 2, we have a 3 and an x, so it doesn't work. 3, yeah, none of those go together. So it's just like that. Now on the bottom, radical 2 times radical 2 is a radical 4. Radical 2 times negative x is a negative x radical 2. X times radical 2 is a positive x radical 2. X times negative x is a negative x squared. So on the bottom here, you know, the top just is 3 radical 2 minus 3x plus x radical 2 minus x squared. The bottom here we would get, let's see, the square root of 4 is 2. The minus x radical 2 and the plus x radical 2 cancel each other out and we get minus x squared. And that's it. That's all we can do. That's all we can combine. Can't divide anything. It's just simplifying it. All right, so for your homework, take a look at some of these problems. Now, I'm just going to warn you, some of these are pretty easy, but some of them look a little bit confusing. So, okay, those are the same radicals, we can combine them. Same radicals, combine them. Same radicals, combine them. Same radicals, we combine them. Maybe break them down at the end. What about problems like this? 3 radical 12 plus 3 radical 3 plus 3 radical 20. Not the same radicals. But if we break them down, 3 radical 12, let's see, that'd be 4 and 3. 2 and 2. We could break a 2 out and make this a negative 6 radical 3, because we'd have that 3 left over, plus the 3 radical 3. And then what about the 20? Let's see, that would be 4 and 5, 2 and 2. Breaks that out, that'd be plus a 6 radical 5. Well, we can't combine the radical 5s with the radical 3s, but we could combine those together. And so the final answer would be, okay, negative 6 plus 3. That'd be a negative 3 radical 3 plus the 6 radical 5. And so there's the final answer. So sometimes you can break down radicals, and after you do that, they can combine together. All right, guys, so take your time with this. Go through all of these here. If you have any questions, ask. If not, I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Check your answers on the answer key as well.